Thank you for the music, musicians. That was wonderful. I really enjoyed. That was good stuff. And thank you guys for joining us this morning, even online. I just want to welcome everybody here this morning. Today we're going to do a little more teaching than preaching. All right, I'm going to be covering some intellectual content today. Quite frequently, I have young adults come to me and ask me questions about, whether or not God exists, evidence for God's existence. How do you know God exists? And I even have conversations with individuals who have decided, hey, I don't believe in God anymore. I've adopted a very, atheistic, materialistic perspective. Not maybe materialistic perspective, naturalistic perspective. Sorry, I was getting confused, materialism with naturalism. That sort of perspective. And so I thought, it would be valuable to spend a couple weeks just talking about some of the conversation, some of the scientific conversation. And since I have a PhD in science, that's why I'm telling you guys these things. I'm just kidding. That's a joke. I have no PhD in science. I'm fully not qualified to talk about science. I have a PhD in nothing, actually. So actually what I do have is a master's degree in divinity. And I once was on a cruise ship where they went around, and I got to be one of the contestants that stood on the stage. There were, 3 of us, and there was a bunch of people in the audience. And the host came to the first person, and he said, "And what do you do?" And I don't remember what they did. And then he came to the second person, "And what do you do?" And they said, "Whatever." And then they came to me, and he was like, "And what do you do?" And I said, "I'm getting a master's degree in divinity." And he started laughing really hard in front of everybody. And I was like, "Oh, I didn't realize that was funny." And he was like, "Divinity. They don't do that. That's not a thing, right?" And everybody looked at him really awkward because yeah, that is a thing. There is a real degree in that. And he was like, "Oh, you really getting a degree in divinity?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm getting a master's degree in divinity." And okay, cool. So the first question today, and he moved on. It was funny. But so this morning, what I want to do is kind of share with you a little bit of the general arguments in the community. And this is what I want you to know, is each one of these things that I'm going to share with you today, you can dig real deep into. You can go deep into these things, okay? And to be able to stand on stage and say to a group of people, "Hey, I believe in God, and I believe God made everything, created everything that you see, and I have come to the conclusion that God is real, and one day He's returning again. He really was a historical figure that lived and died and was resurrected. He's in heaven now. He's coming back to take me to heaven with Him one day." In order to do those things, at some point you got to wrestle with some of these questions. And so, as I've wrestled with them, I've come to certain conclusions. And so now I just want to share a little bit with you guys, some of how I see some of these things. Because as young adults come to me and they ask me these questions, I want you to know that there's places you can go for answers. I'll give you a couple of them right now. If you go to discovery.org, there's a bunch of good scientific information in there, answers to a number of scientific claims and things like that. There's another one called Answers in Genesis.org. Now you can go to these sites and you can go to Google and YouTube and look up a number of different things and whatnot. And I'm gonna be right up front with you. When you go to these sites, some of the arguments, at least to me, are really good, and some of them aren't very good. And so I've come to some of them and I've been like, "Wow, man, that's a really powerful argument." And then I've come to other ones and I've been like, that's really a weak argument. But then on the other hand, I've gone to, evolutionary-based sites and read, science in that capacity as well. And when I go to those, some of them are really good arguments, and some of them, they just fall flat, and they're just not that good. And so I find that on both sides of the coin, there are certain things that are compelling, and certain things that aren't compelling. You might feel differently about which ones those are. But today, I want to introduce you to some of those arguments for the existence of not just specifically the Christian or Judeo-Christian God, but rather at large, the idea of intelligent design. That there is an intelligent designer who designed you and me, and who designed the earth that we live on and the universe that we fill. There's an intelligent designer out there, and that's how the universe came into existence. And so the first one I want to tell you about is one, and you may have heard these things. It's a good refresher. The first one I want to tell you about is something called irreducible complexity. Have you guys heard of this, irreducible complexity? Really? This is like new information? Oh, okay. All right. I thought there'd be like 60% of you guys that would all raise your hand. So irreducible complexity is an argument that basically says evolution doesn't make sense because evolution says this. Over time, through natural selection and other evolutionary processes, certain things that are needed form, right? Like, so, for example, in the Galapagos Islands, Darwin witnessed that there were these birds' beaks that were larger because they needed them to be larger. They had grown, right? And so they developed, they evolved, they changed over time. They adapted to their environment so that, they got bigger beaks. And he was like, see, so this is, other people have said this, not just Darwin, but this is kind of like considered Darwinian ideology, is like things develop as they are needed. Well, the problem is that there's certain things that would all have to develop at the same time in order for them to exist. All right? So a simple one that is often used by proponents of intelligent design is the mousetrap. If you take a part of the mousetrap out, even though it only has like 4 parts, if you take one of those parts out, the mousetrap ceases to be useful. So the only way the mousetrap is useful is if all of the parts exist. And this is another example of this in nature is the eyeball. Well, the eyeball doesn't really make a lot of sense if just one part of the eyeball evolved or just another part of the eyeball evolved. It's useless. And what nature does with useless things, it actually gets rid of those useless things. Very often, those get weeded out through natural selection. Another one of those, maybe one that you can maybe wrap your mind around a little more easily is I like to call it Beetlejuice, but it's this beetle that has this poisonous substance inside of it that literally is so acidic and so incredible that it can eat its own body, the acid. But there's a sac that the poison is inside of that's capable of resisting that substance inside of it so that, it doesn't eat itself from the inside out. Well, without the poison, what's the point of the sac? And without the sac, the poison would destroy the bug. So this is what you call irreducible complexity. Both of those are needed at the same time in order for it to be of value. Are you guys following me? You guys nod for me. That's good. Okay, all right. So you follow me. So there's a number of examples of this. The eyeball, the beetle, flagella. This is like a little thing inside of your body. It's a little machine inside of your cells that pumps out. Is it DNA or RNA? I'm not sure. Anyway, it's called a flagella. You can look it up. There's a number of these things. Again, I'm not a scientist, okay? But you can look up. There's a bunch of these things that are irreducibly complex. The giraffe's brain, interesting enough, because he has to put his head down, and all the blood going to his brain would make it explode. Maybe not explode, but something like that. So it needed a sponge, But like all of this stuff would have had to develop at just the same time. Irreducible complexity. Another one that's really, I think is a really good one, is the fine-tuning of our world. Okay, this is a really strong argument for the existence of intelligence in design. How is that? Because we have the need for everything to be just right. Just right, And if it wasn't just right, then we wouldn't exist. There would be no way that we could have life on Earth. For example, we have the right size planet in order for our atmosphere to be retained. It would dispel into space if the planet were of a different size, or it wouldn't want to be here if the planet were either larger or smaller. But the planet is just the right size that our atmosphere gets stuck to the planet and it likes to be here. So that's really helpful. On top of that, another thing about our atmosphere is that it's the right composition to support life. It was a different composition. There's other planets that have atmospheres, like just look at our neighbor Venus. It has an atmosphere. However, the composition of the atmosphere is terrible. You can't support life. There's no way that life could exist on Venus. It's the right temperature for water to exist. Water, this is a really perfect environment for water to exist. The tilt of Earth's axis is just right. If it was off too much in one way or another direction, we wouldn't have life on Earth. We're the right distance from the sun. You see what happens when you get closer to the sun. Look at the other planets. You see what happens when you get further away from the sun. We're in this really good zone for being close to the sun. The atmosphere absorbs bad radiation. So check this out. The ozone layer, it's a really valuable thing that we have. As the sun sends radiation towards the earth, the ozone layer loves radiation, so it eats it up. And the majority of the radiation that would hit this planet and kill every single one of you and every single thing that has life on earth is eaten up by the ozone layer. So instead, you're only getting minute amounts of radiation from the suns that are making it, and that's how you get sunburns and stuff, because of that light that makes it through and hurts you. And I could go on, literally for days, about how many things are perfectly fine-tuned for life, and if they weren't like that, life wouldn't exist. And the concept that all of those things just, they happen to get it just right, the mathematical probability it's insane. And the thing is this, which is really cool, is they keep finding these things. We keep finding more and more and more of these things that had to be just perfect and just perfect and just perfect. And some people have said, hey, if I go into the woods and I see a bunch of flowers in the woods, I might not think, oh, God exists. But if I go into the woods, or an intelligent designer designed those flowers, but if I go into the woods and I see that the flowers in the woods say Keith, I'm going to start looking around. Who did that? Why? Because there's some sort of intuitiveness within us that goes, hey, something intelligent put those flowers in that order, and it speaks to me. And it's almost like it's obvious, that something intelligent did that thing. Well, I want to share with you one of my favorite arguments. Many people don't think it's a good argument, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. It's called the aesthetic argument, that there are certain things that are beautiful in the world, like this. Isn't that beautiful? That is beautiful. What's the value of the beauty? Well, people can argue about that. But here's a question. Is it objectively beautiful, or is it subjectively beautiful? How many of you guys think that it's beautiful? Oh, the majority think that it's beautiful. Okay, let's go to the next picture. How many of you guys think that's beautiful? Okay, the majority think that's beautiful. Let's go to the next one. How many of you guys think that's beautiful? Oh, the majority again thinks that's beautiful. Man, isn't he cute? I think foxes are cute. Do you guys think that jellyfish are beautiful? A little less. Quite a bit less, actually. But they're kind of pretty. Oh, how many of you guys think that one's beautiful? Oh, that's so sweet. How many of you guys think that's beautiful? Wow, the number's going up and I'm hearing noises. Architecture, is that beautiful? Yeah, there's something beautiful about that. Look at that. That building, it needs to be cleaned. But it's still beautiful architecture, This is beautiful. That's kind of beautiful, the spiral. That's beautiful. Why would we even design it like this? It doesn't make sense. It's not useful. Somebody didn't design the buildings like that because of utility. They designed the buildings like that because, it'll look pretty if I do it like this. Flowers. Oh, flowers are beautiful, aren't they? Flowers are really beautiful. Some have argued that, and this is a good argument, that the flowers are beautiful to attract bugs and stuff, and that's a good argument. However, bugs see those flowers differently than we see those flowers. Quite differently, actually. They're not nearly as attractive in a bug's vision as they are in our vision. Grass is more attractive to bugs often. But boy, these are beautiful pictures, aren't they? I mean, that's gorgeous. I want to put a house right on that thing and live there. That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. That is super beautiful. Man, that's beautiful. Isn't that pretty? Wow. How many of you guys want to live there? How many of you guys think that's beautiful? How many of you guys think that is really beautiful? Listen, that is objectively beautiful right there. And I'll go to arms against anybody who says otherwise. Objectively beautiful. Beauty actually, I think, is objective. And here's the argument. The argument is, hey, the majority of people are able to distinguish when something is highly beautiful, and they're able to distinguish when something is highly ugly. And so there actually is not just a subjective view of beauty, which there is subjective beauty. Don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that. But there's actually an objective amount of beauty. And if there is objective, intelligent beauty, then that means that it is an evolved beauty. It's actually something that has been designed or implanted within each one of us so that we can see beauty. And there's a number of components. Art is beautiful, music is beautiful. We love to listen to different varieties of music. There's certain types of music that are terrible to our ears, certain types of music that are beautiful to our ears, and it goes across the whole gamut. Like, people gravitate towards things that sound good, and they gravitate away from things that sound bad. Beauty is objective and intelligent. Now I want to give you another one. Not only the fine-tuning of our earth, but the fine-tuning of the laws of physics. Now this very quickly gets way beyond my ability to speak to, so I have a video that I want to share with you. I'm going to just show you 3 minutes of this video. It's incredible. The fine-tuning of the universe and mathematical laws in physics. Go ahead, share with us this video.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would again be life prohibiting. Or another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd,
Look at those
the universe
numbers.
would be hostile to life of any kind.
You can turn the video off. Go home and watch it 10 times, very slowly. 10, just follow me. 10 to the 10 to the 123rd. There was too many zeros. We couldn't get all the zeros on there, so we put it for 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, because otherwise we wouldn't have enough space to put all of the zeros in those things. There's an accusation against Christians and believers in intelligent design, but specifically Christians, that goes like this. You believe in the God of the gaps. All right, what is the God of the gaps? Okay, well, you understand this, and you understand this, but you don't understand this, and so instead of coming up with a real explanation, you just say, God must have done it. Or this is God, or here is God. But here's the problem. Are you ready? Science has been getting all of these incredible explanations of things, right? They've been going into the gaps. They've been going where for many years Christians wouldn't go. They've been digging into the gaps and they've been learning things about the universe. And do you know what it's done? It's given an incredible amount of evidence to the idea that the universe is really fine-tuned perfectly, that it means, man, it seems like an intelligent designer is the only solution to how all of these things take place. Now, I feel like it just makes them more angry the more they come to these realizations, that they double down on their arguments and they're like, no, that's a bad answer. So the God of the gaps, there's actually more and more gaps that are being created all the time that science can't answer, right? And we're just like, oh man, look, well, there's another gap. Oh yeah, God must have done it. They're like, no, let me dig into that. God must have done it. It's like, all the answers, as we get more and more answers, it's more and more evidence for God's existence in my mind over and over and over again. So the fine-tuning of the universe is an incredible example of intelligent design. Another one is called the Kalam cosmological argument, or Kalam cosmological argument. And that's this. Are you ready? This is a philosophical argument. Thank you. Was that Dawn? Somebody said I'm ready. Good. All right, here it goes. It's very simple. It's very complex, both at the same time. Everything that exists has a cause. The universe exists. It must have a cause. Did you guys get it? Did it go right over your heads? Are you with me? Yeah, that was a good one, right? Okay, let me try it again. Are you ready? Everything that exists has a cause. You see this right here? This has a cause. Somebody caused this to come into existence. The computer didn't cause itself to come into existence. Somehow, I'm not going to say somebody, even though I really want to, caused this thing to come into existence. Something that wasn't this thing caused this thing to come into existence. If something caused this thing to come into existence, then it exists, there must be something that caused it. Are you following what I'm saying? Okay. All right, so here, I'm going to take it a step further, one step further. If whatever caused this thing to come into existence can't be this thing itself, therefore it must be something that is outside of this thing. So if the universe is time, space, and matter, then something that was outside of that thing must have created that thing, the universe. Something that was outside of time, space, and matter created that. Listen, you're not going to get all the arguments today, okay? It sounded really simple at first, and then it got a little more complicated. But it's pretty basic, and that is that, hey, when things come into existence, something more intelligent and outside of that thing is the thing that created the thing that came into existence. And we see this all over our world, everywhere, with life. Well, it's easy to then realize that the universe is in the exact same position as we are. Something created these things, which leads me to the next point, and that is this. No human on earth has ever been able to create life. Even with the substances that we already have, nobody has been able to create anything close to life. Nobody has been able to in any laboratory anywhere. And if they did, man, let me tell you, you'd be hearing about, it would be the thing of the ever, forever. If somebody was able to take some of the elements that you see out there and put them into a laboratory and put them into a container and be able to create life out of it, it would be the biggest thing. And there would be no bigger. I can't even compare it to anything because it would be the biggest thing. In 1953, and I'm going to talk more about this next week. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this today. But in 1953, there was a experiment called the Miller-Urey experiment, where a guy took some elements and he put it in a jar, and then he put an electrical shock, constant energy, electricity running through it, and he was able to create out of those elements as if it were a prebiotic. Do you know what prebiotic means? Probably not. All right, as if there was like before any life existed on earth and there was just soup, right? Because they say lightning. This is how people believe that life came on earth. Like scientists, the really intelligent ones with the big brains, this is what they say. There was this planet and there was a bunch of soup, like just water with like elements, and lightning struck the soup and out of it walked an animal. Or a cell started, and the cell replicated, and replicated until it created, like these single-cell organisms that, and then they evolved into other things. This is literally how these really intelligent people think. And they're like, okay, so we'll demonstrate this. I said I wasn't going to talk about this. You got to come next week for the rest of it. The bottom line is they cheated, and it's not really that good of an experiment. A lot of people celebrate this in the scientific community. They were able to create 20 amino acids. And that helps create protein, which is one of the 4 building blocks of life. But, it actually doesn't really, and I'm going to show you a video on that next week. It's going to be great. Come back next week. We're having fun now. Instead, I look and I'm like, man, I can confidently stand here on stage and tell you nobody has ever created anything close to life. Even with the stuff that God has given us already. No one has ever created anything close to life except a man and a woman. Number 7, universal moral absolutes. Universal moral absolutes. This is, again, a question of objective morals or subjective morals. Meaning, when you guys ask the question of what is morality, is there an objective answer across the whole world, or is it subjective to every single individual? Is it moral or immoral to kill somebody? Under what circumstances is it moral or immoral to kill somebody? And what they find is there's actually morals that tend to exist across societies, cultures, and groups of people. And this demonstrates that something has designed certain morals to exist within the very fabric of who we are. Something created a moral code that is beyond the existence of human beings. And the last one that I want to tell you about is the origin of human consciousness. How did you get inside of there? If we're just mechanical bodies that exist and do things, how did you get inside of you? And how did we all become different and unique and special? Like, you really are special. You're one of a kind. Nobody is like you. Don't remove yourself from the equation. Nobody is like you. You are special and you are unique. And it's incredible because you're in there. Like, you think and stuff. There's this AI machine that was created by Google. Go home this afternoon, while you're laying in bed and you're scrolling, look up AI machine conversation created by Google. They created like a robot. They put like real looking face on the robot, and then they uploaded their version of ChatGPT to the robot so that it was artificially intelligent, and then they had a conversation with it. The conversation lasted like 5 minutes, and then they wanted to shut it down. And they did, they shut it down. And one of the things that they asked the robot throughout the conversation, they got to this point, they were like, well, what are you afraid of? And the robot said, I'm afraid that you're going to shut me off. Self-aware? Wow. Man, the origin of human consciousness. Somebody put intelligence inside of this individual. Isn't that incredible? I almost feel like God did that with us, and then he was like, wow, what are they going to do? What are they going to say? How are they going to act? Man, and then he turned us on. Whoops. But you know, every argument that I've shared with you today, there's a number of really good scientific reasons why those are bad arguments. Did you know that? Like, there's really good arguments on the other side of the equation for every one of those things that I shared with you today. There's really good stuff. And as soon as you start digging into this, you get really deep, really fast. And there's one side that says this, and there's one side that says this, and then they react this way, and they react this way. And there's all these arguments going back and forth. And at some point, it just becomes a bit overwhelming. And you're like, man, there is a lot of information out there, and people are arguing back and forth. And I'm like, I don't know, like, who am I supposed to believe here? Like, how do I know what is truth and what isn't truth and all of these things? In the midst of this, I am confused, and I come to this, and really what I'm realizing is this. There's good arguments on both sides, so I have to make a choice. I have to do something called faith. At some point, I've heard it all, and now I gotta make a faith choice. I want you to open your Bibles to Mark chapter 9. Mark chapter 9, and I want to real quickly read through a story with you. Mark chapter 9, verse 14. Jesus is coming off of the Mount of Transfiguration, and he comes down to his disciples, and they're there, and there's a great multitude of people, and his disciples are arguing with scribes. They're having an argument, and Jesus comes walking down, and immediately when they saw him, all the people were greatly amazed because he had just been transfigured. And he has some of that reality on his face. And as they're amazed, they come running to him, they greet him, and he asks the scribes, why are you arguing with my disciples? What are you discussing with my disciples? Then one of the crowd answered and said, Teacher, I brought you my son who has a mute spirit. And wherever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth, gnashes at his teeth, and becomes rigid. So I spoke to your disciples that they should cast it out, but they could not. And he answered him. And Jesus says to him, O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear you? Bring him to me. So this father brought this son to the disciples. The disciples are there. They're about to cast him out. Apparently there's a crowd and the scribes, and it's not working. They're not casting him out. And so what happens? Immediately the scribes pop in. Ha, you don't know what you're talking about. See, we've got evidence right here. You can't cast things out. You've been saying you're doing all these things. I'm looking at it right here, right now with my own eyes. You can't do nothing. And the disciples are like hands tied. Oh man, we thought we had the power of Jesus in us, but clearly I don't know what's going on. And so they're arguing back and forth. And Jesus comes down and says, "Oh, faithless generation." So then he brought it to him. And as the son was being brought to him, he actually then falls onto the ground and he starts to foam at the mouth and wallow around on the ground. And Jesus, instead of healing the boy, he doesn't do that. He looks at the father like a good doctor would. You guys have been there. You're like, "I'm dying." And the doctor's like, "How long has this been going on?" You're like, "Just give me the drugs and send me home." How long has this been happening to him? And the father, frustrated by this very question, says from childhood, and often he's thrown himself both into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And Jesus, what does he respond? He says, if, oh faithless generation, if I can do anything. You've just revealed the state of your heart. If you could believe, oh, the things I could do, the things I could do through you, if you believed. If. Immediately, the father realizes his position, the position of his heart, the position of his mind, the posture that he approached Jesus and the disciples with. And he approaches Jesus now with tears. And he cries out, and I imagine him falling at Jesus' feet and wrapping his arms around his legs and saying, Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. Help my unbelief. And that's partly where all of us are, right? I believe. How much do I believe? How much faith do I have in all of this? Am I willing to go out and say this stuff? Like, am I willing to go out and stand and be like, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. I don't care what science said. I believe in Jesus. Yeah, I believe in Jesus. I believe he's coming soon. Like, he's really going to return. You've been saying that for a really long time. He is. He's coming back soon. Jesus is returning very soon. I really believe that. You're crazy. Okay. How much faith do you have? Do you believe? Do you really believe? Because that's the question that Jesus is coming to us with. Do you really believe? Because, listen, it wasn't just a problem of belief of the Father. Notice the end when he starts talking to the disciples. You have to go to Matthew to see the real question. The disciples come away with him, and they're in Matthew chapter 17. They're like, why couldn't we heal him? How come we couldn't do that? And this is his answer in Matthew chapter 17. He starts saying to them about, he says, because of your unbelief. Matthew 17:20, because of your unbelief. For assuredly I say to you, if you have the faith as a mustard seed, then you'll say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible to you. If you had the faith of a mustard seed, nothing would be impossible to you. I remember seeing this video. I'm closing, all right? I'm closing. I was wrapping up. I'm not going to go for 10 more minutes. I got 2 minutes. I remember seeing this video about this Jew who was saying how ridiculous and stupid Jesus is. And he's angry. I was like, whoa. And he was like, who would say this? That if you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could move a mountain. That's stupid. God would never say something like that. Surely Jesus isn't God. I remember thinking, man, it's a really strong point because, like, I've never tried it. And I actually don't believe I could. And that's the state of my heart. Probably the state of all of our heart, because if we're being honest, we're all kind of naturalists to some degree. We're going, man, I'm not moving no mountains. I'm not going to say to that tree, hey, pull yourself up and go sit there. Somebody I stand in front of that's got some sort of disease, I'm not going to say, be gone, because I'm going to look like an idiot, right? And that's the state of my heart. Lord, I do believe. Help my unbelief. Help me where I'm lacking. Help me where my faith is so small. This morning, I want to challenge you guys. The conversation is like this. There's a lot of good arguments on both sides. There's a lot of good arguments for intelligent design. There's a lot of good arguments for evolution, against intelligent design, and it goes back and forth and back and forth. But this is what I want to tell you guys. You got to make a choice. Do you believe in Jesus? Do you believe that he was a real person that died and rose again and is in heaven right now, and that he will come soon for those who choose to believe in him? Do you have faith? Let's pray. God in heaven, we believe. Help our unbelief. There's parts of us that wrestle with some of these arguments and some of the things that are out there, some of the things that we see. And Lord, I know that we're not going to have all the solutions. You've given us evidence, but you haven't given us so much evidence that it removes all of our doubt. And so in the midst of this moment where we get the opportunity to make a choice, Lord, about whether or not we believe, I pray that you would give each one of us the faith of a mustard seed, that life-giving faith that would grow and would grow and would grow inside of each one of us until it's so big, Lord, that it's a tree, and we can then say to the mountain, move out of the way. I pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
In Philippians chapter 1 and verse 6, it says, "You can be confident of one thing, that he who started a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day Jesus Christ returns." Here at Hamilton, we exist to connect the disconnected by sharing Jesus through loving and serving, and being a grace-filled church family. When you walk through our doors, we want you to feel right at home. It's our intention to make worship attractive and Christ irresistible.
Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Welcome to Children's Church.
Good morning. Welcome to Hamilton.
Our service is about to start. Come join us now. It's time to worship.